I'm asked why I'm being recorded. And I'll say, what good does it do? I was a teacher for many years. I taught mathematics. But society itself is hostile because as a teacher, fight in order for my students to learn a subject that is very essential. I'll give an example. A house and an automobile are two of the more expensive things we buy, and yet people spend the least amount of good common sense in buying these two things. And they find themselves in a lot of trouble. And the husband is working, the wife is working, the dog's working, the rats in the house are working, the children are working, and there are many people who are barely able to get by. To give an example of a house, the media, in order to promote itself, gives very little real information about purchasing a house. But after you buy the house, you find there's a plumbing problem. It's going to cost you $7,000. There's a foundation problem. Who knows what it costs? There's a roofing problem. Who knows? $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. And the way that people treat things with very little care, like carpeting and furniture. For a while, I lived in an apartment for 4 years. I was so shocked that when I went out to the trash bin to throw things away, I found furniture there. I never imagined that people could be so neglectful in the way they treated their mattresses, their floor lamps, their coffee tables, their sofas, their dishes, their carpeting. All of this has to be spent. And the biggest thing that no one ever talks about are the other expenses in the house. As an example, for instance, the amount of money that a homeowner gives in interest, that in the matter of the lifetime of the mortgage, the price of the house is almost tripled. No one talks about that. Not the realtor people, because if they did, they'd never be able to sell a home, because people don't know about these added expenses. That interest is a big way that people lose money. Even those who use credit cards, paying 20, 25, 30% interest. Another item is property tax. On this house, I pay $10,000 a year. Why should I give $10,000 of my money to the city when I work so hard and I save money? And I wasn't like the people who neglected understanding what is involved in buying a home. And after being careful and saving my money, being thrifty, being a good consumer, they tax me $10,000 a year. Do you know what 10,000 is? It's not gross, it's net. Because when people say I give $10,000, don't forget the government takes about 30% of my income for income tax, both federal and state. In other words, the $10,000 is only 70%. So I must earn much more than that, like $15,000, so I can save $10,000 to give to the city. and when I see how they waste money. Now, this is the purpose of learning mathematics. So if the society knows more than I do, and they know they can ignore mathematics, and I'm not talking about advanced mathematics, I'm talking about simple arithmetic, fractions, decimals, percents, basic things like that. So when I'm asked to give opinions of things, if I see how for many years the many things that I try to transmit to other people, knowledge of basic mathematics, what good does it do to talk about these other things? As example, marijuana. No one's going to convince me that using marijuana, even the so-called quote, medically, that's nonsense. Marijuana is against the basic needs of real needs of a body. If you want to do something, eat properly, drink properly, think properly, live properly. And if you do these things and avoid the things that are harmful to your body, even lying is harmful to your body. People don't see it that way. I hear people using more profanity. That's not good because it reflects the mind. This thing called proper English that you can use. You don't have to resort to that type of a language because it shows the mentality of the person. In other words, the mental processes of a person is as important to the health of a person. And I'm just going to say one more last thing. I'm 93 years old. And I've said this before when I was interviewed before, so some of this might be a repeat. I wonder sometimes, why am I living? What am I living for at this age? One of the problems I experience is a lot of pain from my tip of my hair down to my toenails, but I endure it. And when I endure these pains, I'll say, why am I living? I'm not trying to get an advanced degree. I'm not trying to get a high position. I'm not trying to save my money so I can buy a good car. Anyway, one of the things I do is as I'm doing my daily activities, like when I go to a store and I'll see a person over there smoking, I feel a duty. There's an impulse that comes into me and says, George, go up to that person. And I go up to that person, I'll say, pardon me, but I see that you're smoking. You know, I smoked for 40 years. For 40 years, I ingested, or whatever they say, I inhale smoke. And then I puffed it out like a locomotive. I wasted my money. I smelled up the house. I was responsible maybe for somebody getting a very serious illness, like cancer. And I'll approach this person and I'll start and say, you know, I smoked for 40 years. And I'll say, one day when I was sitting in this small room, I happened to look up at the ceiling, and as I was looking at the ceiling along the edges, it was black. And I asked my spouse, what is that? And my spouse said, that's the result of your smoking. Now, if cigarettes can do that to the edge of a house, along the edges of the ceiling and walls, what is it doing to my lungs? And that was the beginning of my getting away from smoking. And there is no question that smoking does a lot of harm to people, and even secondhand smoke does a lot of harm. And yet there are people who are stupid enough that with all the information they give, which was not given to me when I was young, that information was not available to me when I was young. And when I first heard it, I thought it was nonsense. But you've heard of it, and you know that it can be harmful to you. And if you think it's difficult to quit smoking, and you think it's a real hardship, imagine the hardship that you're going to experience if you ever get lung cancer. Your pains will be so much greater. And you know, when I talk to people like that, they sense my security. That's a wrong word I used. They sense my sincerity, and almost invariably they'll say thank you to me, and they extend their hand out to me and shake hands with me and say thank you. And then later on I'll say, you know, that's one reason I think I know why I'm still living. Because if I'm living and I can do these little goods, daily goods, then there's a purpose of my living. Now the same thing is true about alcohol. The same thing is true when someone shows jealousy and envy and other such characteristics. All of these are harmful to the body because it goes to the mind. So when I talk to young people, invariably, I find that so many people are appreciative of the efforts that I make to give this kind of information to them. I see a young girl at a cash register. She's been so indoctrinated that she's a liberated woman. What's liberated about a young girl who's standing at Home Depot on her 2 feet, 8 hours a day, 5-6 days a week, pushing the cash register button? Is that liberated? What about her duties when she has a child? Then the government comes in and shows what a great government it is, because the government gives her financial help. And the government is now the new father and mother. And she is appreciative of this. But within herself, she knows that there's something missing, that she's failing to do one of the most important things that a woman should be doing, and that is to nurture and show love, affection, time, and effort to the little child that she brings into the world. And these are the many kind of things that I see in my older years that this society has diverted from. Well, maybe I'm not doing too much good. Maybe I'm like a raindrop. But at least I feel that what little that I have been accomplishing the last few years are benefiting some people. And I hope from my talk that you think about your life. Your life should be a mind of clear. This should be clear of envy, jealousy, deceit, lies, hostility, envy, all of these horrible things, because that's the basis of a lot of physical illnesses. And secondly, don't let big business divert you and let you believe that you should be drinking wine and drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes and puffing on these e-cigarettes nowadays. They're looking for their profits. they're not looking out for your good, and they're getting lots of money. And the people who are indulging in these things are losing. And one of the first things they lose is good health. I hope I have said something that if anybody hears my message, of course I'm not a great public speaker. Everything I'm saying is just spontaneous. I might not have spoken with real good continuity, but I think you know the message that I'm saying. And one last thing I do want to say. I don't think that I have a halo above my head. Yes, I've done wrong things. I've cheated, and to this day I feel sorry that I have cheated in the past. Maybe I've even lied, maybe as a child, not as an adult. But we should, as we grow older, we should change our ways of life, and we can. Because even though when we pray and we say the Lord's Prayer, and in the Lord's Prayer we say, "Thy will be done," it is God's will, yet man has a certain amount of will. And if you exercise those wills, you don't have to take a substitute to stop smoking, and you don't have to take some sort of a pill to cease doing any of the things that I mentioned that are contrary to your well-being. I hope from what I said that you will benefit somehow. Thank you for listening.